Hello and welcome back to the Alchemical Arts. It's wonderful to have everybody back again, and it's been a bit of a break over the Christmas period, but we're back and we're back making colours, and it's good. It's been a lot going on. I've been really busy with the watercolour business and trying to really get that off the ground, and the feedback from that has been amazing, and so I'm really grateful that people out there really like the product and what I have to offer, and the pigments that I've been making have actually been going to use and getting into the hands of artists. That was the whole intent behind it, and it's good. It's it's been a really rewarding experience. So today what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and do a little bit of my own crafting and experimentation in some particular shades of colours that I'd like to achieve. So Cobalt Blue and cobalt related pigments they're almost becoming something that I'm feeling very comfortable and confident with. Like, I can very comfortably produce a good solid shade of cobalt blue time and time again. I had some difficulties using the gas forge with, variations on the cobalts and stuff like that because of the fire gases and, irregular temperatures and stuff like that. So it was challenging, but I learnt to develop a cobalt blue by eye and feel and practice, which was a cool thing. But over the break I managed to acquire myself a second-hand kiln, so it's digitally controlled, so I have a much better control over temperature and atmosphere and environment and gradual heating cycles and stuff like that. So it's going to lead to me being able to really expand the amount of pigments I can make, as well as really be more precise in what I'm doing. So essentially what I'm planning on doing today is I have an array of cobalt related compounds here. So I have the cobalt carbonate and the cobalt chloride, which are my two main cobalt sources. I have chromium, and I have alumina and zinc oxide here. So alumina is aluminium hydroxide. The basic principle of the cobalt blues, or the cobalt pigments, if you go back and watch the earlier episodes you can see a bit more in-depth detail about them. But the basic principle is you take a cobalt source and you calcine it, so heat it up really hot with an aluminium hydroxide, and that means that you get a cobalt aluminium oxide mixture that becomes blue. Now if you substitute the aluminium for zinc, you get a green. If you add some chromium oxide into the mixture, then you can get teals and turquoises. And so what I'm looking at doing today is playing around, and you'll see a little video pop up down the bottom of me doing the process, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with all sorts of different variations and ratios between these different ingredients to see if I can create different arrays of shades in that turquoise, teal, blue, green spectrum. And so essentially all I'll be doing is taking a little bit of something, a little bit of something, a little bit of something, grinding it up in the mortar and pestle. Once it's finished being very intimately ground in the mortar and pestle, it'll go into a crucible. It'll then go into the forge or the kiln. It'll get heated up to about 1,000 degrees for about an hour or two, and then we'll take it out and we'll review the color. My theoretical stance on all of this is the greater the cobalt content in relation to the alumina, the deeper and darker the blue is. The greater the alumina, the paler and lighter the blue is. That's my understanding, or at least the theoretical premise I'm working on. And then as you gradually increase amounts of chromium oxide in there, you get more and more tilting to a green, because obviously you can see chromium oxide is a very bright, intense green on its own. It's used very extensively as just a pigment as it is. The thing with the zinc too is the zinc should also impart greenness. So I'm hoping to play around with some lighter and darker mixtures and see what results come out of this experimentation. So what I'll do is I'll skip through and we'll make everything. I won't explain exactly the mixtures, but at the end what we'll do is we'll review all the colours at once. I'll put up on the screen the varying ratios of each of the compounds in each of the mixtures. And yeah, I guess that will then tell me whether I have learnt enough about the cobalt compounds to predictively anticipate a shade, or whether I'm still sort of grasping in the dark and I haven't really understood the chemistry at all. But at least this way I'll have some experimental data of some different extremes, and through that I should be able to refine the process and hopefully we get some shades out of it that I really like, because I'm looking for new colours to add, and I love cobalt colours. I think they're really, really beautiful to work with. They're heavy, they're strong tinting, they're opaque, and they're very, very stable compounds. Alright, let's proceed, let's get to some work, and we'll see how we go. So after the grinding and homogenizing step of putting together all the ingredients, we have our different mixtures, and the next process is just to simply load them into crucibles here. It's interesting to note just how sort of green, dullish green the mixtures are. It's due to the chromium oxide mixing with the slight pinky color of the cobalt, and so you end up with these sort of, yeah, these pale olivey green sort of dirty colors, but obviously they're going to come out very different to that. So we'll just take these down to the kiln and we'll fire it up and we'll see how these results turn out. Right, so this is a lovely new kiln that I got here, which I picked up. It's made here in Melbourne. It's a beautiful old thing. I think this was built in 1993. It's still running nicely. It's got a little digital controller here. It goes up to about 1100 degrees. Anyway, so with the mixtures in the crucibles like this, what I tend to do with these square ones is I stack them up like this and place a little ceramic lid on top, and with the small one we do the same, little ceramic lid. This just protects the surface of the pigment from any overly intense direct radiant heat hitting the top, which could cause, say, the cobalt to oxidize, and cobalt oxide is black, so that could destroy the color. So this just gives it a little bit more protection. And then essentially all I'm going to do is open up the kiln here, just have a basic shelf, and we shall load these in. And then we'll plug this in, set it to its maximum temperature, and it probably takes about 35 minutes to get up to temperature, and then I'll probably run it for close to 2 hours of calcination time, and then hopefully it should be nicely done then. So yeah, this is the resulting pigments that I got from a couple of days worth of grinding, calcining, and testing and tweaking recipes. And some of them I'm really happy with, some of them were very unexpected, and some of them are pretty average. But we'll go along and I'll give a brief description, and I'll also bring up the ratio amounts on the screen as we go through it. So we'll start over this side here, because this was probably the most surprising pigment. This was a cobalt, aluminium, zinc oxide mixture, where I thought, because the zinc and the cobalt together make green, so this one here in the middle, as you can see, is just a straight zinc cobalt mixture, and it's very, very green. I thought, okay, if you substitute a tiny amount of zinc into the aluminium and the cobalt, maybe you'll get a slightly tealy turquoise green. But what actually ended up happening was it created this much more vivid, sort of lighter, more enchanting blue than my standard regular cobalt blue, which It might be very hard to see here. So the traditional cobalt blue that I make is actually quite, it's quite a deep, slightly purplish tinged blue. It's got a nice sort of royal depth to it, whereas this tiny amount of zinc has sort of really brightened up and popped the color, and I'm actually really happy with that, and that was an interesting surprise discovery. This one here, well, these next two here, and probably this one here, these are all just variations of zinc, chrome, aluminium mixtures. Some, this one has less chrome, this one has more chrome, these two almost are identical, and all that was being varied between these two, for example, was just the alumina content, where I was trying to really up the alumina content to see if it would brighten it. But again, both of them are very dark. This one is also particularly dark. This one is more blue, and I'm actually kind of happy with this because you can see in the painted out samples here. So all of these are just mixed up watercolor. Each of these pigments mixed into a watercolor binder just so you get a test and a feel for what they look like. This one has a really interesting quality of sort of having bluer granulation, where some blue particles sort of settle heavy, but then sort of greener tinges on the edge. It's a very dynamic pigment. This one does it too, and this one does it too, but it's definitely heavier on the green, whereas this one's slightly heavier on the blue. Interesting, but ultimately I think they're a little too dark. They're also very similar to the chrome green I already make, the cobalt chrome green I already make for the watercolor set. If we move along to the middle here with the straight cobalt zinc mixture, this is a really nice color. This is what I was expecting from a cobalt zinc oxide mixture, and so there's not really many surprises here. I just wanted to run that experiment again and just see how it works, see if I can improve upon it. And it's a really nice sort of grassy, appley sort of foliage green. It's got some olivey tones to it. It granulates very nicely, and I think this is something I'll definitely work towards including in the future iterations of watercolors that I do. Now, the other two really interesting ones are, let's just swap these around, are these two. So these two mixtures I did last in the whole series of things. This one here is, again, it's just a cobalt, aluminium, chrome mixture, except in this one I only slightly increased the aluminium and slightly decreased the chrome from my standard recipe. And I think this is actually the most successful of the batch. It's definitely the most dynamic and most beautiful color. It's very much the turquoise that I was looking for. It's more blue than it is green. It's fairly light, even though it's also fairly dark, so it can sort of go both ways depending on how you paint it out. But this is very close to the shade that I would want. I maybe would want to bring it out a tiny bit. Maybe I can try adding a bit of zinc in to see if it helps it pop out a little bit more. But that's a really nice color, and it's a really nice example of the kind of color I was going for. And this was, interestingly, the one where I didn't really blow out the amount of aluminium and actually kept it quite low to the more sort of standardized amount, and it's lighter. So I think I was just inverted in my theory. To a point, increasing the aluminium lightens the color, but only to a point, and then it actually starts to darken it. This last little mixture here worth talking about. This was a cobalt, chrome, aluminium, zinc mixture. It was the full gamut. It was only the ever so tiniest amount of chrome. It was a tiny amount of zinc and a fairly large amount of aluminium actually in comparison. and it's quite nice. It's very similar to the other zinc mixture over here, but just less. There's less brightness and less straight pure blueness. There is a tiny sort of greeny depth to it, which just ever so slightly tints it away from being a very pure blue. It again is also dark. That's probably because of the exaggerated aluminium content, but yeah, it's a good one. It's an interesting one. It's certainly difficult to kind of pinpoint where it sits. Anyway, that's my result of my experimentation. So all in all, I think this was a reasonably interesting experiment, and I certainly learnt a lot. As I said in the beginning, I was interested to see whether my predictions would be able to be validated or not. And I think actually what I've learnt here is that what I thought, which was increasing aluminium content would lead to brighter, well, not brighter, but lead to a lighter hue, doesn't actually work, and it almost works in the inverse, where increasing the aluminium to a point actually makes it darker. What I did fascinatingly learn in this is that adding tiny amounts of zinc oxide into the mixture can actually brighten and make the mixture more pop a little bit more, which is what I was actually going for. So that's kind of a cool little discovery. Obviously pure zinc oxide mixtures make green, but you're able to manipulate and alter the quality of the blue by little additions of zinc into the mixture, which is very nice. And I think there's a couple of shades in here that are real keepers, or that could be tweaked upon a little bit more, and we'll get what we want out of this. I guess this is a really exciting sort of point for me, because when I first started doing this, it was merely a case of, can I take the recipes that I've been reading and produce the pigments that I know and that I love, and can I understand how they're made and all that sort of stuff, and I've been doing that. But now I'm at a stage where it's like, I want to envisage a colour that I've either seen or in my mind, or a mixture of colours, and think, can I make that colour as a pure pigment? Not, do I take when I'm painting, you can take a few different pigments and mix up the colour on your palette. But when you're crafting pigments, you're in this position where you're trying to craft a pure pigment, something that is, on a very fundamental molecular level, that colour. And so this is a really interesting space to explore, is, can I shift colours and create colours that, haven't necessarily been on the market before? It's not that people haven't made these sorts of mixtures, it's just, am I designing a mixture that's unique to what I want to do, and unique to the public out there to experience, essentially. So, I'm going to finish up today's episode by putting out a little call to people that if they, either in the comments below, or if they head over to the Facebook page for the Alchemical Arts, which there'll be a link in the description, I'm going to put up a poll where people can vote on the mixture that they like the most. So I'll number them and I'll put pictures in the poll. And the pigment that gets the highest votes, I will pick in and focus on that one to develop properly to exactly what I want it to be. And I'll release that as a colour. And maybe I'll make a little competition out of it. So if you vote or share the poll, regardless of which one wins, everybody will go into the draw, and I'll pick some people out at random, and I'll send them a paint of the colour that wins, which seems like a fun thing to do, because I would like to know what people, what colours people would actually want to see made and produced, because I think it's good to have the interaction between myself and the audience in some form or another, and help gear the direction and colour development that I'm going through. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in my paints, I have an Etsy store and I'm selling a selection of paints at the moment as watercolours, so again, the link for that store will be in the description below. But until next time, hope everybody stays well out there, enjoy being creative, and thank you for watching.